All right, hi. It's Friday. We're a week in. I hope you're doing okay. I've talked to quite a few of you via the Google Meets for my office hours, through email, and it's been good. It's been good to touch base with you. If I haven't heard from you, I would love to. I miss you. I miss being in a room together every day. So I wanted to take some time today to kind of review what we've learned this week. Um, the test is next week. We're going to talk about that at the end of this slideshow. So make sure we're preparing for that, that we are, if we have questions on content, that you're asking them. So far, if I'm honest, my office hours have just been kind of used to connect with students as far as how are you doing, what's new. There hasn't been a ton of review for US history. So I am assuming that means we're doing okay. I think you know what's coming in a way my sophomores don't. Like, you know what the expectations are, you know what the test looks like. But please, please, please check in with me if you're concerned on any of that. So attached to this on Classroom is a link to a slideshow called Online Learning Week 1 Recap. So if you want to pull that up, that's what I'm going to be using to touch base with you. On the note of office hours, I would like for Thursdays to be mainly US history content and Tuesdays to be mainly world. That being said, I haven't really seen a lot of my sophomores on there, so please still jump in on Tuesdays. I don't want to just sit and stare at my screen for an hour, and I haven't had to yet, but I'd like for Thursdays to be US history content. So feel free next week, click the link on Classroom and jump in. All right, let's do this lecture. Online Learning Recap Week 1. So slide 1, we see the people and the movements we've learned about this week. We see Ford, who hopefully earlier today you read an article about, you did a little bit of video watching on Ford, who is a blip compared to how much time we spent with LBJ and Nixon. Then we've got Ford in the middle. On the left, to the left of Ford, we have a picture from a protest concerning the ERA. On the right, we see a similar protest, very like 60s hippie print, environmental protection in 1970. And bottom left, we see the seal of the American Indian movement. And so that has been the emphasis this week. There's been a couple of assignments. You had one on Tuesday, and then you had one yesterday. So you should have turned 2 things in this week. Grades aren't updated. I'm hoping to do that this weekend. I'm still finishing up a couple of tests from Africa for my world history students. So my goal is to have that done today, and I'm being optimistic. I would like to have it done today. We'll see what happens, and then get some of your stuff graded over the weekend. All right, so slide 2. See if I can keep myself on track today. Lecturing to a phone has... I'm a little over it. I've done a lot of lectures for world history, and I really miss having an audience and interacting and having discussion. So I'll do my best. Gosh darn it. I'm not funny, so I think that is also a problem. I've heard some other teachers are quite good at these videos. I'm not. So I apologize in advance, but this is what you got. So let's review. All right, slide 2, Equal Rights Amendment. So as the name would indicate, this is a movement in the 1970s, largely supported by Gloria Steinem, by second wave feminists, to have a constitutional protection based off of gender, based off of sex. These women, and some men, primarily women, felt this was necessary to ensure that people couldn't be fired for their gender, that they couldn't be discriminated against for their gender, that there was some sort of protection to ensure no discrimination of pay. Sexual harassment becomes more acknowledged. We still have a long way to go even now. But in the 70s, we start to see a shift and treating women equal to men. And so there's this big movement under second wave feminism led by Gloria Steinem. You read an article on Gloria Steinem, a primary source from her perspective, on Tuesday. I'm pretty sure that was Tuesday. And so you've seen that a little bit, but the goal was to grant equal legal rights for all citizens. However, there was a pretty strong opposition to this, and we know that because it didn't pass. Like, it didn't get ratified. And even to this day, 2020, though they now technically have the amount of states they need to ratify, the ERA is not, the Equal Rights Amendment does not exist as far as protection for women. So Phyllis Schlafly, which is not an easy name for me to say, is kind of like the head of the anti-ERA movement. She was a woman very strong in her conservative values, very strong in her like 1950s ideas of what a woman's role in the home was, what a man's role in the home was. And there's just a belief that the ERA is going to undermine all of this. So you see this listed under the parade of horribles on the slideshow, that to open the ERA, according to this side, would the pro-family, the Phyllis Schlafly side, that it would just open up a can of worms, and suddenly like we'd have women brought into the draft, women would have to be forced to work outside the home, men would no longer have an expectation of being the sole breadwinner. And these same people typically were also opposed to marriage that was not between a man and a woman. So very anti-same-sex marriage and anti-abortion. So we've talked about these camps throughout all of American history, right? Like 20s, 50s, now we're in the 60s and 70s. There's a group of women who say, I want more, and there's a group of women who say that's not what a woman should do, or not what a woman is. And it's a conflict. And I've also haven't done it justice as far as how many like subgroups there are, because you're not just, rarely are people either like 0% or 100%. Like most of the time they're somewhere in the middle. And that's true in women's rights issues throughout all of American history, but also the 1970s. So that's the ERA. Slide 3, it wasn't passed. They needed 38 states. That's still true today. You need 38 states to ratify something to the Constitution. And the deadline, which had been extended, was 1982, June of 1982. And they didn't get it. They didn't get the states they needed to ratify in that time. Interestingly, modern day 38 states have ratified it, and that first article spoke to this a little bit. But because that deadline has expired, the ERA still does not have legal standing. I feel like I'm talking fast, but it's also been talking 8 minutes. So let's keep going. AIM, the American Indian Movement. What you really need to know is that this was a grassroots movement that was founded in the late 60s, was super active in the 70s, and it was formed in mainly urban areas. It started, I believe, in Minneapolis in Minnesota, and it was intended to address issues of poverty, of police brutality, of ensuring that Native Americans had equal rights and were appropriately protected by the law. So you on Wednesday took a look at AIM. It's going to be really similar to some of the other movements we've looked at as far as minority groups attempting to like take back their rights and take back their sovereignty. All right, slide 3. Environmental. This is the stuff I wanted to talk about in person so we could argue a little bit. But the environmental movement, the 70s is going to be this first sense of, oh crap, we are damaging the earth. We as a society, we as a globe, what are we going to do? Our water isn't drinkable, our air isn't breathable, our industrialism, our capitalism is harming our earth globally, nationally. How are we going to handle this? And this is going to be the impetus of the EPA, which still exists today, the Environmental Protection Agency. You should have looked at this stuff on Thursday. And out of this, we see some federal movements towards protecting the environment. We see Earth Day established. We see the EPA established. Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act. And that, in short, is the beginning of the modern day environmentalist movement that many of you subscribe to. Not all of you. If we throw our food out the window, that probably isn't making the earth a better place, but a lot of you do subscribe to it, and I wish we could have talked about that a little bit more in person. All right, Ford. You took a look at Ford today. He is going to be vice president after Nixon steps down. He is most famous for pardoning Nixon. The economy is not super great under Ford, and he's a one-trick pony. He pardons Nixon, and that's kind of the story of Ford. So, important upcoming dates. I'm pulling up my calendar. So Wednesday, so today is Friday. Monday, I am talking about the fall of Saigon. Tuesday, we're going to do a little bit of review. We're still figuring out what that's going to look like. And then Wednesday is your test. So it's coming right up. We've mentioned this. I had a question on this in my office hours. It's just the enduring understandings. Slide 8 has your enduring understandings listed. We spent a lot of time when we were together on Vietnam, and that, which is good. Hopefully, if we can pull from our memory, pull from our notes, we'll be prepared for that. But the first enduring understanding is, to what extent did the Vietnam War change American society and our American foreign policy? So remember, when you're setting that up, your first sentence should be, to this extent. You need to fill in that blank. To the blank extent, it changed. And you need to have 3 examples for that. And then similarly, you need to pick 2 of the following: gender, race, sexuality, and environmental. We talked race and sexuality together, gender a little bit together with the feminist movement, and then environmental, unfortunately, we weren't together for. But you pick 2 of those, and you need to argue to what extent did social change occur in those categories. So when you're coming up with that one, I really only see other teachers might come down differently on this, but I only want 2 examples under there. So I want you to talk to me about gender, how much did it change, and race, how much did that change, or gender and sexuality, or gender and environmental concerns. So the first one, you should have 3 examples, 3 points of evidence and analysis, and on the second one, you should have 2. And let me know if you have questions on that. Okay. All right, slide 9 is just a reminder of your rubric. That's what it's called. And we do have a little bit of an expectation, when we talked about this on Wednesday as a U.S. history team, that you do better on these. Not necessarily in your content, because you're doing well on your evidence and your analysis, but you shouldn't have spelling errors. You have time to write good essays, so do it. Use spell check, proofread. It's your summative grade now. So I don't know how to be clearer on that. Use the time to write a little bit more of a solid essay, a little bit more of a prepared essay, a little bit more of a clear essay. So yeah, I think that's it. My dogs are barking in the background, so I hope that doesn't distract you as much as it's distracting me. I hope you have a good weekend. I hope you take care of yourselves and reach out if you need anything.